Hi, everybody. I am here finally. It said I was disconnected from everything, so I had to kind of refresh the page. First off, for the viewers that are currently here, can you guys hear me? Okay, I've got the microphone pretty far away from me, so I just want to make sure that, I don't know, you have auditory stimulation. Let's say that. It's a bit quiet. Okay. I guess I have to scoot it forward. Is this better? Okay. I don't wait, I didn't check. I don't know how to check this, but I didn't have my I didn't have my microphone initially plugged in, and I didn't make sure that it was the right microphone being fed to the stream. Does anybody know how I can check to see if that's the case? Because I don't see that feature. I see a place where I can mute it, but I don't see a place where I can actually make sure that it's not just the computer microphone, that it's the external microphone. Okay, great. I hope you guys have been doing well. For those of you in the United States, I hope you had a great Labor Day. It's almost over, which is the tragedy of Labor Day too, right? And I hope you've had a great weekend. Sorry I wasn't here on Friday. I was not feeling very well, so there's that. But I'm feeling a little better, I think, now. Had to do 3 asthma treatments today. So, and this is the effect of having been sick months ago. Like I have not had to use my nebulizer for years, since I was a little girl, probably. And I haven't had to do that until I got sick. Then I've had to use it a lot more frequently. So you don't want to get this illness that's kind of flying about right now. Okay, so when I was younger, either 15 or 16, I got the brilliant idea to dye my hair. I got the brilliant idea then to dye my hair blonde. Why I thought this was a good idea, I have no idea. I don't really know what I was thinking. So I went over to a friend's house because I didn't know how to dye hair. And she dyed my hair. And it turned out orange because my hair is so dark. It just did not lift the color enough. And we didn't want to damage it, right? And so that was done. And then I got the brilliant idea, because I'm a teenager, right? To chemically relax my hair. But this was about 3 weeks later, and I made the mistake of thinking it was much longer, just because on my calendar at the time, when I had visited my friend, we had canceled and had to delay it for like a weekend, and I didn't account for that gap. And so I looked at my calendar. It's like, okay, yeah, it's been enough time. I can totally chemically relax my hair, right? And my sister told me, I don't think it's been enough time. You probably don't want to do this. But I didn't listen to her because, of course, you don't listen to your siblings. I still don't, actually. And so I chemically relaxed my hair over at my dad's house. My hair fell out is the result of this. And it was comical at the time, for sure, but I was devastated. I was bald, like in patches, mostly patches, and then what little hair remained, it was super short. And yeah, so that was really embarrassing. And imagine being a teenager and having a mishap like that, where you are now walking around your high school pretty much bald. So I also had another girlfriend, and she was my best friend. And we would always visit each other's houses. There was a period of time that we homeschooled together. Her mom was like a second mom to me, and vice versa. And her mom ended up getting breast cancer. and she was going through treatment, and she lost all of her hair because of the treatment. And my mom actually helped take care of her during this time. And my mom, we went over to visit like we always did, and she told my friend's mother about the mishap, and she then asked me to show her, like, hey, just show her, you guys will be you guys will be twinning basically because you both don't have any hair. And it was funny. She was laughing. Everybody was laughing except for me. And I think I don't remember how I had it covered up, but I refused to show her. And because I was just too embarrassed. Uh, and I wish I had shown her because she ended up dying. And I regret that moment in my life so much. Uh, and I think about it frequently, and there's no way that I can ever like atone for that. I can't go back to tell her I'm sorry, because she doesn't exist anymore. Um, and I, with the whole COVID thing, with the whole kind of pushing people to kind of risk their lives for the flippin' economy, it also reminded me of this event with my second mother, because our time is so limited here. And I think I want to kind of talk about that and how we kind of forget these things. Maybe it's because our society doesn't really handle the fact that we are mortal very well. Um, I think that even religion doesn't, the popular religion of the major societies don't really handle it very well, at least to the best of my knowledge. So I think it's always kind of in the background, but nobody's really addressing it. Think about if you lose a loved one, or if someone who's lost a loved one, they get a very brief grieving period, right, in our society where, um, yeah, you lost somebody, maybe you lost a spouse, but the next day your ass better be at work, right? And I think this is frankly just wrong. And I think our society needs to handle this in a more constructive manner, and also remind us about that, because our time is very finite here. I think that there's kind of this propaganda that exists centering around our time. And I try not to say these things like time is money. I try not to say those things, because time is not money. Time is priceless. You cannot put a value on time when your life is finite in nature. You just can't. Hi, Michael. You just can't. So it's this kind of very grotesque, to me, a grotesque um, way in which our thinking has been targeted towards time, money, economic health, uh, when in fact we run out of time. It's also grotesque that we spend a lot of time focusing on all of our time and energy on these external things like work, because we need to survive. When our time is finite, a lot of us in the workforce, even in school and education, it is not a democratic process, right? You do what your boss says, you do what your teacher or principal says, end of story. And if you don't, you're going to have some repercussions, whether you get fired, reprimanded, suspended, whatever. And if you're in the United States, arrested, especially if you're a student of color. So this kind of puts a very corrupting view on how our time is valued, because we give so much of it to work, to school, to all of these things, when we don't give a lot of our time where we actually should. And in my view, that time should be spent around family, friends, and other loved ones, period. And I don't know, maybe you guys agree with me, maybe you guys don't agree with this. I would be interested in understanding whether that's the case, whether anybody has thought about this, because I think one of the reasons I'm talking about this now, and I mentioned because of the whole COVID thing and sacrificing our lives for the sake of the economy, is it not grotesque to you that it's not sacrificing your life for the sake of the economy? It's, you are expected to give all of your time, let's call it your life energy, right? All of that energy and investment to help your boss that will profit from all of that they've taken from you. The point of society is to basically share resources, share and distribute resources in order to maximize everyone's survival. What are you doing when you expend all of your time that is very finite in nature? It is absolutely priceless. Um, Trying to survive again for a meager amount of money in comparison to these billionaires and even millionaires, whom they are the ones that are instructing you to do all of these things, to give them more time, give them more time. Um, Especially under these conditions, why are we doing this? It just seems so absurd. We are assuring the survival of not only these millionaires and billionaires, but their progeny, right? Because they're going to pass down their wealth and power to their children, whom will do the same, and so on and so forth. What investment have we got as a worker invested in our future progeny? We don't have that luxury. And so not only are we basically devoting so much time in order to get more power and wealth to those who already have more power and wealth already, but we're assuring the survival, not all of maximizing everyone's survival, but we're assuring the maximized survival of the powerful, the rich and powerful, in giving and sacrificing so much to them, which is what's happening. I just think that I, I get these thoughts, and I do not understand why our society is this way, why we have. I mean, I kind of see the kind of historical steps that has been taken in order to get this mentality in place. I just don't know why it's stuck. I don't get it. I don't see why we have to accept these things. It is not enough for one person to reject these things. I understand this, but why did we all go along with it when it's absurd? We're getting to a stage in human history, right, where, for better or for worse, right? Well, hopefully for better, automation is going to take over a lot of positions. What are we going to do with workers? We can't reasonably retrain people, right? Because that's another amount of time and even money and investment that individuals have to sacrifice in order to just get a position and just get a job. So it's not reasonable to have that expectation on anybody to just, oh, you know what, your job's gone, but just go to school. You'll just relearn a skill. That's not a reasonable solution to that problem. We have nearly unlimited resources, right? We could feed everybody in the world with just the food we throw away, for heaven's sakes. And we don't. We don't. I don't understand. It blows my mind. I can't grasp that concept. And I can't grasp the concept of why so many people accept this as this is the best we have. Do you really think it's the best we have when, again, I've laid what the actual reality is that's happening down when you're assuring that not the survival of your own progeny, but of someone else's progeny? Is that the is that really the best human kind can do? Is that really the best system humanity can think of? Because I don't believe that's the case. I think that if you defer to that being the best, there's nothing you can do about it. This is human nature. You're not only wrong, you're also underestimating people, and you are generally being really lazy in your thought process because maybe that's the best that you can think of. For I'm talking to someone who says these things, not you personally, but maybe that's the best that they can think of. But it's certainly not the best someone else can think of. Someone else could possibly think of something that works better for everybody, that distributes the resources evenly, that then will help assure the maximized survival of more people if that's the goal. And usually that's the goal. That has been our goal since we've existed, is to do those things. Maybe you guys can help me grasp this, but do you think that how do you break through that wall so that we can start chipping away at that idea where what we have right now is not only the best, but it's good? Because it's not. We can have better. When I think about these things and I think about all the losses, think about people that are struggling. They work hours and hours and hours a day just to feed their family. They barely see their family members. How many of those people were brilliant mathematicians and we never knew about it because they were struggling for survival in a world where that shouldn't be the case anymore? How many, how many brilliant neuroscientists could there have been that we will never know? How that seems like such a loss to me, and in a weird way, I grieve that a lot, and it makes me so sad to realize how many people we don't know about that had, and maybe they still do, the ones that are currently alive, have so much potential and so much to give, not only to their direct family members, but to society as a whole, when they have that possibility and that potential to give in a way that benefits society. Yet we will never know of them because they were struggling so hard. They never got to show what they were truly capable of doing. I just, it's just a grotesque system if we live in a system that does that. And it does. Why are we so brainwashed to believe that this is the best? I understand the propaganda thing. Maybe you guys can explain to me where the stupid concept of time equals money came from, because that, I think, would help in some way, so that we understand that time does not equal that. Money is a relatively new concept, even in human history, especially in like the world history, right? The history of the world, let alone the universe. I mean, we're here a blink of the eye in that regard. Finite time is so valuable, guys, and I just want you to realize this before it's too late. I feel like a lot of maybe older adults realize this, and they can reflect on the fact that they lost so much time giving to work, to their boss, um, and did say, well, time equals money, and we can negotiate that time, so that I can live on, so that I, for 8, 9, 10, 12 hours a day in some cases, if not more, can be under a system where I am in the control of someone else who is completely unrelated to me, and whom, if we never had a working position together, I wouldn't give a shit about, for all, for better, for worse on that one. Um, why you have to give that maybe older adults realize this and younger adults don't really think about it. I know I certainly didn't when I was a teenager. By God, I didn't, which is why I did not show my second mom my hair, or my bald head, my no hair, if you will, um, because I was being selfish, and I did not grasp the fact that she could just not exist one day, even though that was really the writing was on the wall at that point. It was there. I think we all knew it. We just didn't really talk about it. And that's why I have so much regret in that circumstance. Even though I can go, I can, say, yeah, I was a teenager. Teenagers are stupid. Yeah, we don't have, as a teenager, our brains aren't fully developed, and so we make very bad decisions a lot of the time. I can explain that, but it still doesn't help me feel better about it. And I just want people to not make those mistakes, and to realize that don't settle for that stupid line that your time is money, because it is incomprehensibly valuable, more valuable than something like that. Period. Regardless of your education level, regardless of how many years in the field of whatever field you have behind your belt, in your belt, behind your belt, behind in your history at some point. I don't know what the phrase is. No matter what, everybody's time is priceless. Again, I keep saying this because I'm sad about this. And I know that there's very few people that will watch this and that will maybe even talk about it with their family and friends. But I think we should talk about this more, and we should realize these things more before we're older, before we're very old, and before we don't even get to really value that idea too, that we shouldn't give so much of ourselves to someone else who doesn't care about us for the sake of monetary compensation. That should not be the case. I think I was going on this idea that automation is going to replace many jobs anyways. And so we have to then start thinking, how are we going to assure people survive without monetary compensation? Will we then go to a society that is more egalitarian? Will we, basically say, who cares if you're working or not? You should be able to eat, and you should be able to survive whether or not you work electively or not, whether you can't work because of whatever physical or because of whatever condition that you may have, whether you don't work because you just don't want to. It really shouldn't matter, because we should value those things more than we do. And we have to understand and have to start kind of thinking about the fact that at some point our society will not look like it does today. and it will not be sufficient to keep it as it is today. Am I making any sense? Sometimes when I get upset about things, I kind of don't make much sense. Let's see. I'm going to see. Mr. L. TLB mentions, I knew my life was over when I lost my kids a couple of years ago. Nowadays, I'm just grateful I get to wake up every morning. Yeah. In the end, I try to help those around me make it through their lives. That's all I want to see now. I love my friends and family. My friends are family, and I want to see them happy. Yeah, I think that is, first off, I'm really sorry for your loss. I couldn't fathom such a thing happening. And it's so much strength people have when they're still here, making it through after having experienced something like that type of loss. It's unspeakable how hurt that is and how hard that is to get through. Uh, but yeah, I think our priorities start changing when we realize, how valuable each other are, and how, moments that we have are should be cherished, with the people we love and family and friends, especially definitely if your friends are family, as most people's friends are. Um, I think, we can apply this to people we don't even know, um, and say that their lives are just as valuable as everybody else's, even if they're a complete stranger to me. And they should not have to sacrifice their time for someone else's financial gain at all, because of the fact that the two just aren't equivalent. It's immeasurable, and it's doing a disservice to our thought process and our mentality to equivocate those two things. That's not the right word. To equalize those two things, um, it does such a disservice to our way of thinking, our worldviews. How do we start shifting that worldview so that we don't keep making that connection? I don't know how to get it through to people, and I wish I did. I wish I had a better conclusion to this, because I know I feel terrible about it, and I don't get to talk enough to people about this, because I know, first of all, when I do start talking to people, they just often shut the conversation down very quickly, um, because of the fact that, it's usually older kind of boomers that do this, because, they've equated, for some reason, time as money, money as the economic system that's in place, the economic system as the social system that's in place, like the economic system and, let's say, democracy. They've meshed all of these things together, and it's not through explicit fault of their own, not at all. I think it's through a societal message that continues to be conveyed, to the masses on behalf of those that it benefits the most. Mark Caesar says, I know it's cliche to say it, but loss can make you a stronger person in the end. It may take a long time to get there, but you will get there in the end. Damned hard to though out damned hard to tough out the bad times though. Yeah, it's hard, and I mean, for the few losses I've had in my life, in every situation, I have a regret there. Um, I just do, and it's because of maybe even something that was completely out of my control. But I still have that regret because, again, the time just it doesn't exist for the person anymore that we lost. It doesn't, I mean, maybe you have a pet too, and that time doesn't exist for that pet that you lost that you cared so much about, right? It just doesn't. And why are we not valuing it more? I don't understand. Why are we just accepting it? Why are we, especially boomers? I mean, that are coming into an age where they're starting to retire and they're starting to leave the workforce, which we don't get to do, by the way, until we're mid to late 60s. And how long is the lifespan in the United States? 79 or something, 78. It's much lower in the US than it is in many other countries. I think in some other countries it may be 81, 82. And so you've worked your entire flippin' life, the majority of it, to have what, 10 years left? 10 years left. That's all. That's all you get. And what was it for? I just, why do we accept this? Stripper, this name, okay. Stripper Liquor said, if you lived and developed your worldview in the 60s and 70s, it can be a real challenge to replace many of the fundamentals that simply do not apply today. Yeah, but is it impossible? And the weird thing is that many people that did grow up in the 60s and 70s, they're still the ones kind of running the show, if you will. And so they get to kind of make decisions for the rest of us. How can we at least reach the rest of us so that we can say, hey, you shouldn't be making a decision about this, because in my opinion, the worldview that you're expressing to all of us and that you're telling all of us to have is wrong, period. Majufi mentions that my mom worked until she was 85. Wow, that's a long time. And I remember being a kid. My dad worked a lot. He still works a lot, I think. No, he doesn't. He's retired now. But I think he does some other things. He works on the side sometimes. But I mean, there would be times where he would have to go out of town and he wouldn't be able to take us for the weekend because we lived with our mom for the week, and he took us for the weekend. And those are the weekends that he didn't take us are gone. You know, we grew up those times that, you know, he had with us in those years, where he was, you know, developing us as human beings, as thinking human beings, hopefully. He missed out on, he lost for work. And I remember seeing my dad work when I was a kid, when I was younger, and I didn't really grasp that shouldn't be the case at all. In fact, I remember telling my dad, like, oh, I'm going to work forever or something like that, something stupid like that, just because he worked a lot for a very long time. And now I can definitely say I would not say that to my dad today. Let's see. Yeah, see that Majufi asked the question, how do we change our political point of view? I don't know. I think I want to have that discussion because I don't know, but I have a friend who's good at talking to other people and getting them to kind of change their minds. He's very good at it. And I don't know how he does it. He specifically works, or he tries to change the minds of a lot of conservatives because he himself used to be a conservative. So he kind of knows the language that they speak better than someone like me who has never held that particular worldview that conservatives have. And so that, unfortunately, I don't know. That is not a question for me to be able to answer. But hopefully sometime, maybe soon, I can have him on and he can better address that. Because I think it's a struggle. I think you can talk to your choir all day long, but nothing will change unless you talk to your opposing factions, because it's them that ultimately have to bond with us in order to change our situation for the better. That's just the reality of it. And should we be in a position where we're like waiting for the younger generations to change it for us because, oh, well, they think differently, they're maybe more progressive, all of these things? That is a heavy burden, right, to put on their shoulders, to say, hey, change society for us. I think that in and of itself is horrific to me, that we cannot find a way to, basically fix our society so that it works for all of us. I don't know. Um, Mr. Mr. LTLB says, we are all the same. We are all living the same life. Some may not live the same struggle, but while some of us live a better life, we should remember others don't. Precisely. And that's a point that I think differs a lot of the times between people that tend to hold more progressive views over people who hold more traditional views. There's a perspective taking aspect. I feel like people who hold those more progressive views are better able to walk a mile in someone else's shoes than those who are traditionalists. I always say this, and I know that I'm not the only one who says this, but those who hold traditional views, they have to experience something themselves in order to understand why a progressive feels the way that they do about a situation. That is something that is problematic because so many people hold those traditionalist views, right? At this point in time, it's about 50-50. And 50% of the population, I think, should be enough to help change society. But from all indication, it doesn't seem like it is. William Bustos, thank you for your YouTube channel. Your videos are informative and refreshing. Thank you, William, for saying that, because when I was thinking about talking about this, I was like, well, this isn't a positive thing to talk about, because I don't really have an answer either. I don't have a conclusion to this. And so I appreciate you saying that you're getting at least something out of it, because I was kind of afraid that this particular topic wouldn't be so watchable. People wouldn't be willing to watch it because it's kind of depressing. At least it's depressing to me. I need help, you guys. Because I cannot figure it out why some people hold the worldviews that they do. I guess maybe some people think the same thing about more progressive views, but if you think about it, when has a progressive really been wrong? I mean, look at the timeline of human history. It's always progressives that kind of move the needle, to where it's like, oh yeah, slavery was bad. We can finally say that now. And guess what? It was the progressives of the time saying that. It was the progressives of the time saying Jim Crow was wrong, right? They weren't wrong then. And so why is it that traditionalists are fighting so hard against progressives when progressives, the timeline, have always been right? They have always been able to say, this is what is appropriate. This is the way we should exist. And that they've been right. that's another thing I don't understand. Why not just traditionalists just defer to the progressives because they know what the fuck they're talking about? You obviously are incapable of understanding other people's circumstances. Progressives aren't. Should society be run in a manner where everybody's circumstances are misunderstood or neglected, or should it be run by people and by policies and principles and ideas that consider those things? Because that is if traditionalists are always going, oh yeah, will ultimately lift all of society up if you just follow our traditional no change ways, if you just follow that, when have they been right about that? Seriously, that is a question for them. That if you are a more if you are a more conservative person, please answer that to me, because I don't see it. I don't know when you guys conservatives have been right regarding society, and if you look at our historical timeline that you probably have some knowledge about. Well, why? Why do we then, as progressives, not realize this too? Why do we, as progressives, not come together? Because I think 50% of the population is enough to change society for the better, and rapidly for that matter. It's enough. But why do we not understand our own power in this? Why? I understand too, and this is something that should make progressives angry, is we hold the morality of society on our shoulders. We are responsible for that. And that is a very heavy burden. That's why I don't think it's okay to neglect very important issues like climate change, for instance. To say, okay, the younger generations, they'll take care of it. They're more progressive, surely they'll fix it, right? That is a heavy burden to place upon them. And we shouldn't do that. We have a responsibility in this. We have all benefited, maybe not all of us, but a lot of us have benefited from the pollutants that are out in the air that are causing climate change to occur in the first place. We use plastic, we use gasoline, we use, we emit carbon and all of those things. We have a hand in this. So we have a hand in fixing it too, or we should, at least in my opinion. Yeah, William Bustos mentions that our mainstream media has grown too partisan. They shape the message. If people don't do their research or talk with people outside of their bubble, they close their minds to new ideas. Yeah, precisely. And that's the point, right, of media today. It's got two purposes: propaganda, distraction. And maybe those aren't really so separated, because in my view, I do believe that distraction from issues, from things that we should be talking about, that we should be challenging, is propaganda, even though we may find it entertaining. We need to just keep that in mind. Thank you, William. This is for pronouncing my last name correctly. LOL, thanks. Yeah, I don't do that very often. I am very bad at pronouncing names, and I feel very bad about that because everybody mispronounced my last name too. They always spell it wrong for once, and for two, they just mispronounce it because they spelled it wrong in their head. So I kind of just brush it off because I'm so used to it. But at the same time, it's just like, there it is again. There's that misspell that changes the whole name pretty much. Mr. LTB mentions, forget mainstream. We all know not many pay attention to what mainstream media says. It's what we decide to choose to pay attention to. I'm not sure if that's the case. I think that a lot of us do pay attention to mainstream media. Now, at the same time, maybe a lot of us don't really agree with it, but we do still pay attention. I think it's kind of comical because I know and I've said this many a times, like, oh, go to alternative media sources. But guess what? I'm still going to mainstream media to read articles. I never watch mainstream media, but I do read their articles. They tend to be a little bit more thorough in whatever they're talking about or whatever they're discussing in article form anyways. So I do read the article despite saying like, oh, we shouldn't, because it's nice to understand what's being said and what's being propelled as a message to people, even if we don't agree with it. I will read Fox News articles. I think I've mentioned this in a live stream a few weeks ago too, that I do read from Fox News. Again, I want to know what type of worldview is being expressed there, so that I can better equip myself with, I guess, the tools to counter that. But I do believe that at least older people, again, boomers, they do, a lot of them pay attention to mainstream media and pretty much go with that. I think it's kind of this idea that they've learned to trust that media, which at some point in their lives, it was trustworthy in nature. But then, it got corporatized and all of these things happened, and it no longer a public utility and a public resource. It became a medium of distraction or a medium of assuring that something is neglected. And I think that when I include mainstream media, I'm including like our entertainment in this too. Movies, for instance. Movies is a great form of propagating worldviews. Just think about like all of the all of the kind of heroic movies you can think of, comic book movies, all of those things, they are displaying some sort of worldview message in them. And it's usually pretty traditionalist in nature, despite maybe they have a female lead or something that we believe is like, oh yeah, that's more progressive, haha. But it's still the same type of scenarios taking place, the same structure. Until we change that structure, within that format, within the messaging, it's going to be traditional in nature. And so we have to consider that. And I think it's a good way to not only propagate worldview, but to distract people from what's happening. Means that they're going to just keep doing it again and again and again. And so we are culpable in this. I try not to reinforce the behavior, to be perfectly honest, but I'm not everybody. I don't know the context of this. Torrential Rage says it was progressives at the time, such as Teddy Roosevelt. People didn't have a grasp of why those things were bad. And the funny thing is that he was a Republican, right? And it's alarming to see how regressive in a way certain people have become, or certain factions have become, in comparison to where they were 40 years ago, 50, 60, 80 years ago. It's alarming, or more, 100 years ago for maybe. And it's kind of strange too. It's how did we get ourselves here type of thing. It's another question that I have. Torrential Rage mentions that I said, I did miss this part. So sorry. I said progressives years ago used to be eugenicists. It was hip. and forward thinking to them. I think that so that's not entirely true, but it's kind of half and half. So progressives at that time were interested in science. And so the messaging behind eugenics was scientific in nature, trying to weed out the bad genes so that only good genes survived. And doing so via preventing people from reproducing that they considered to have bad genes. I think it was this kind of messaging that was behind that again, that, oh, this is supported by science. And for some reason, I think progressives tend to get caught into that idea. Oh, it's scientific, right? So therefore, it must be right. I think we need to be careful with that, especially both progressives and traditionalists should be mindful of that. That just because you think it's science or it's being presented to you as scientific, it may not be so much so, or it may not be anything new. Something that comes to mind in that is I did a video months ago on Neuralink. It's spelled Neuralink. And this was the company that Elon Musk was supporting in order to basically, design basically a brain chip, right? To be somehow connected to a Bluetooth in nature, maybe even eventually be capable of being online and in the brain. So it kind of, I think the ultimate goal is to figure out consciousness at that point, which is kind of, where our consciousness lies. And if we can communicate basically without speaking, just with our thoughts, all of those things. It's in my view, I know nobody has explicitly stated this. I read a while ago this thing, and it was a line that stuck out to me, that when you have everything, what is the thing that you want the most after that? And it's immortality. Because there's still an aspect. You can have all the things in the world, you can have all the resources, but you're still susceptible to death. And one of the ways that immortality is being addressed in our society right now is via transplanting consciousness and keeping that consciousness alive, if it's even capable of being inseparable from our biological selves in the first place. That's one avenue. And I think that that's the avenue Elon Musk and his company, he didn't found the company. Again, he's kind of he's the money people. He gives them money and then he takes all the credit type of thing. I know I got a lot of pushback from that video because Elon Musk fans tend to be very fanatical in nature. And so they don't really understand why the things that Elon is saying or doing aren't really that revolutionary in nature. Like they've already existed in the field, or like the ultimate goal of that research, which I didn't even address that immortality aspect in the video. I just said, maybe he's trying to get more money, which is true, because you invest money into something in order to get a return. That is how that type of society works. And, I got a lot of pushback for that for no reason, because people don't really understand, again, that what was being done there is not revolutionary. I did not read the update. As far as what's being updated, I've only heard about it, or I've only seen like a little bit here and there. I haven't read any thorough articles on the matter. But as far as I understand, the update isn't that spectacular either. So again, that's just one more thing. Anyways, where was I going with this? I was just kind of complaining about that, about people not really understanding. that William Bustos mentions that anyone with a medical background would enjoy your video. Smiley face. Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, so I think I don't know where we are in the discussion here, but I'm wondering if this is true or not. So Jake Smith mentions that not long ago, getting into medical school was not hard. Less qualified doctors were a one-stop service, working from their homes, doing everything from colds to surgeries. Yeah, that's true. In fact, it wasn't until quite recently that medical schools even existed. I remember researching about kind of when they kind of poofed into being and how they did, and that's kind of why a lot of these medical schools that are that we believe are very old in nature are, named after whatever founders, John Hopkins, things like that. And that's why, because these people weren't necessarily physicians, they weren't researchers or anything like that, but they had an interest in the topic, or they kind of practiced on the side. There was no certification. I don't know if that, I still think that if you are physically taking care of people who are sick, that takes something, right? That takes a will that some people don't possess. It takes a caregiver mentality, especially if you're like, say, the town doctor. I think that you're thinking of kind of these small town doctors whom would go from house to house checking in on patients and things like that. They may not have been qualified, but who was qualified at the time, right? I don't think anybody was, because medical science has since advanced. Some of the procedures and things like that were just ineffective or even harmful, right? Bloodletting probably isn't the best way to handle every sickness that ever existed, right? Well, I mean, we understand that now, but at the time, who knew? But it took time to get there, and we continue to evolve. I don't really understand the point of this conversation, though, but it's fine. I think it's a good way to the blur between hard science and soft science. Johnny Drive-By says the blur between hard science and soft science. I don't think soft science exists. I think that where you're defining something that is soft is maybe not a good way to define it, because it doesn't make it any less valuable as far as knowledge is concerned. It does help update our understandings. So say psychology, some people will say that that's a soft science. It is in some instances, it is a practicing science where people try to provide treatment to patients whom are sick, and they try to do so based off of the research that has come from both medical and psychological research in order to help their patients. There's also the aspect of where researchers exist in the field of psychology, and it doesn't make that research any less procedural in nature. It's still the same scientific method being applied. All of that. What is volatile in those cases is human behavior, because we can see as we develop as a society, there is a definite shift in what we do, how we think, and all of those things. And it's a little different with our physical bodies that we can visibly observe, that we can definitely like take blood and measure. It's different, because behavior is so volatile in that regard. It doesn't make the science any less so, if that makes any sense. Mhm. Okay, yeah, Aaron A, thank you for getting me back on track. I was talking about immortality and the goal of the technology, right? And so that I think the immortality aspect may be trying to understand and implant consciousness into a device that therefore it becomes immortal. If you keep that device up and running, essentially, like maybe a computer, maybe it's a computer consciousness type of thing. I think that's one avenue that people look to in order to gain immortality. Another one is to basically reverse aging, essentially, and to maintain our biological body in that regard. Um, I think, based off of what I know about the brain and what I've understand and research and all those things, I don't think consciousness is inseparable there. There is no dichotomy. Just because our if our brain dies, our consciousness is gone. Um, and it's like we kind of need our brain in order to be conscious, and we need that brain to stay alive. And so, and all of our cells terminate at some point. That's just how it is. And I don't think that that is a particularly productive way of gaining immortality through that consciousness aspect. I think it's still making that general mistake of the dichotomy of, mind brain dichotomy. And from what I know, it doesn't really exist, that dichotomy. And so how it's kind of forcing that dichotomy and trying to, I guess, at some point create it, when at the same time, we can't even explain it ourselves. Even researchers today debate what consciousness is. Um, we don't have a solid grasp of that. We don't have a solid grasp of kind of what makes a person in totality, their internal world, right? We don't have an explanation for that at this time. There's definitely avenues people have gone. I think I've done a video on this with another YouTuber, actually. Um, I don't remember the name of the video. It was a while ago, but it's in there somewhere. And I think I mentioned this about consciousness and kind of the research that was actually relevant at the time. Research moves pretty slow, so it probably not much has changed. Mm. Yeah, so Aaron A says, don't you have a video discussing consciousness? Yep. And it's in there somewhere. Head transplant. Yeah, that's good. That would be funny. Yeah, I don't see it. But some people, maybe even Elon Musk, think that dichotomy exists, and so they fund a company that specifically is trying to target that aspect of the brain. Essentially, they're trying to make something that's broken whole, for instance, and they're doing this in an internal aspect, trying to kind of get underneath, or in, I guess, underneath the skull, basically, into the brain to transplant something in there in order to cause a reaction, maybe a thought reaction in some cases. I think that the researchers themselves have stated, like, no, our goal is to basically um, help people with disabilities uh, become more participatory, become more whole, so that they, as if they're broken, right? Become more able to be in society as a working adult type of thing. I know that that was mentioned during one of their conferences that they held, that I watched. It was flipping 2 hours long. And so I think that that is a goal that they have. I don't think that that goal, while it sounds noble in nature. I think I mentioned this in the Musk video, actually. I don't think that that is the right way to think about it. I think, for one, people with disabilities aren't broken. They do participate in society already. They may not participate in society in the way in which you want them to, which is to contribute monetarily. And we go right back to that idea of money being time and how untrue that is, and how everybody in society must somehow help along in service and be in service to the economic state of society. That is not true. That shouldn't be true. It is true right now because that's our mind, that's our worldview. But I'm trying to change that, because that shouldn't be our worldview. And I think that the goal of Neuralink should be, if they're focusing on people with disabilities, it should be the more social aspect. A lot of people with disabilities do actually work too, by the way. It shouldn't be with the expectation that they will therefore contribute economically to society once they're fixed. It should be they will be able to have a social life, and that will make them emotionally better. Because a lot of people with disabilities do feel very isolated, and they don't really have the social interaction that others have, which is the internet came along and is changing that a lot, because people with disabilities are able to interact in that capacity online. And so thank God the internet exists, to be perfectly honest. But again, I think that should be the goal, if that truly is the goal. If you're truly interested in aiding people with disabilities, it should be that social aspect. That's an opinion that I have. I know not everybody's going to share it. And if you don't share that opinion, too bad. You won't change me on this. Johnny Drive-By actually asks an interesting question. What percentage of the brain has been mapped so far? I think it's the genome. So I don't view it in percentages, to be perfectly honest. When you're talking about mapping, are you talking about like what area of the brain produces an observable thing? Maybe what area of the brain is responsible for assuring that we breathe? What area of the brain is responsible for assuring that we speak to each other and we communicate linguistically? I think that is how we've considered mapping the brain, is kind of mapping it to a behavior or to a function in nature. And I don't think that it's fair to say percentage wise, if I'm thinking of it correctly, because oops, sorry guys. If I'm understanding that question correctly, guys in the comments, if I'm not understanding the question here, let me know, and then I can kind of better answer it too. I don't think we put percentages on that. I do believe that we have a pretty good understanding of what areas of the brain produce some sort of functions for better, kind of okay. I think a lot of things are variable. So for instance, I mentioned in a previous video about handedness, whether you're lefty or righted, and sightedness, whether you're left dominant or right dominant on your visual field, in your visual space. And that matters because, and this was something I mentioned also in the Neuralink video, how sometimes there are people that their brain isn't consistent with other people's brains. So, some function may occur on the right side of the brain, in the right hemisphere, like say in the parietal lobe, and in most people. But there are some people that it's it's flipped. And so when generally when neurosurgeons, excuse me, when they do surgery, they have to first understand what part of the brain is doing what, so that they target the right area during the surgery, and also avoid other areas that could make the surgery more devastating uh, than it actually was, like not helpful at all. They have to do that, and so they have to, um, maybe have a neuropsychologist come in and conduct a battery of tests to understand basically where in the brain someone is having something happen. And so in that regard, it's a little bit kind of questionable, right? Because we don't have consistency. You know, for the most part, everybody's heart is on the left side, and we cannot say that everybody's language centers are generally on the right side. We cannot confidently say that. We can say that for the majority of people that may be the case, but we still actually have to go through the process of making sure that that is the case, because we do know that people vary. I think that's an interesting question, though, and I wish I could answer that better, because I don't see the genome project as a like kind of consistent kind of mapping behaviorally what the brain does, because that's how I understand the brain in its more functional capacity. Uh, okay, torrential rage mentions that I learned that a computer can generate a full working model of 5% of the brain at the time. I have no idea about where computer technology is, and I wish I did. I just don't follow a lot of the artificial intelligence research, because I think that that's in that field, where they try to kind of mimic a human brain, or mimic aspects of the human brain to see how much computer capacity that would take, how much energy that would take, and all of those things, and even if they're capable of doing it in the first place. Um, I just don't follow that a lot, and I wish I did, because it is a very interesting aspect. Oh, thank you for answering. So Johnny Drive-By adds, as a follow-up, I'm not sure. I believe an AI program is being used to try and create a virtual brain. So your understanding might be better than my layman understanding of the brain. Yeah, I don't follow the AI research. I know some people who do follow it a lot better than I do, and so they would be more capable of answering that particular question if it has to do with AI. Yes, that is absolutely true. Torrential rage mentions, I think researchers are still discovering new types of brain cells. Yeah, 100%. A few years ago, researchers found a new type of brain cell that they termed the rosehip neuron. And, it was never known before, because the human brain, we don't actively research it. We don't like have a living brain in our presence and then, kind of poke here and poke there. I mean, there's a lot of problems with that, as you can probably imagine. And so, or we don't like dissect it right there, right? And or we didn't have the technology to basically see these things or dissect it more precisely, or any of those things. And that comes along, we'll start understanding more as technology allows us to understand more. And of course, as we kind of are able to bypass some of the existing limitations, like not being able to, stab a brain in certain areas to kind of see the result of that, that would be unethical, in my opinion. Hopefully, in everybody's opinion, that's unethical. There is technology that has been developed that has the capability of essentially kind of taking offline centers of the brain, if you will, it knocks it out. And so we can research specific areas of the brain that way, but we again have to be careful with that and have to do it in a limited capacity. We can't knock out like huge chunks of the brain just to see what happens, basically in the basal ganglia. If we want to target a very small area of the brain, we couldn't possibly do that in an ethical fashion, especially. Which is why that study with the pig horrified me, guys. I don't know if you I mentioned this also in a video about the pig brain that researchers basically try to keep alive outside of the pig. First of all, pigs are insanely intelligent. And it's a good brain to research because it is the brain that we know of currently that it is more human-like in nature. And so that's why a lot of researchers that do that type of research focus on pigs. But at the same time, what they did is that they got a brain from a slaughterhouse immediately after the pig was decimated, and took that brain, kept it on ice for a little bit, and immediately then tried to revive it. And they were capable of doing so. They revived it, I think, for like 30 seconds. That horrified me because first of all, I know how intelligent pigs are. I know that they're aware of their situation. How horrifying would it be if you were slaughtered and then revived to think about it for 30 seconds and then died again? I find that horrific, and I find that unethical. I think that there are some neuroethicist basically gave those researchers the go-ahead to do this. And if I was in that position, I would not have, because we do not know enough about sustaining what consciousness is, which is what they were trying to do. That's how at least they explained it, sustaining consciousness. We don't know enough about what consciousness is and how it, what is maintained from consciousness. I think, again, if you had a fully conscious pig brain after it was slaughtered, which is a horrifying experience, like I could not imagine giving those researchers the go-ahead for that. And maybe some people will justify, oh, it's just a pig. Pigs are incredibly intelligent. They do have social structures. We just don't care about it because they're pigs, and we just don't think that they deserve to be classified as an animal that is capable of having the same kind of consciousness we are, which they probably are. They do talk to each other, and they do warn each other about certain situations and things like that. Again, horrifying. And because of that, I just think because we don't know enough about consciousness, and because of the circumstances and how the pig died, I wouldn't have given those researchers the check on that. Okay, let's see some more comments. Okay, Torrential Rage says, "Oh God, that pig study was frightening. They had a shotgun, LMFAO. I don't know the shotgun aspect, but yeah, it was pretty bad. Gonna have Majufi, I don't want you to have nightmares. Gonna have nightmares now. Yeah, I hope not. I read that entire study and I was horrified by it. And yeah, I don't want anybody to have nightmares about it, but I think we should also consider those quote unquote lesser beings, right? Because we do not know enough about the brain to understand if other animals are capable of understanding their circumstances in the way in which we understand, the way that we understand that we are living creatures that are susceptible to biological processes, and we die. We understand that. We can contemplate that aspect. And do we seriously know that other animals are incapable of contemplating that aspect? I don't think we do, because we don't know how it looks even in our own brain. So how do we know how it looks in a pig's brain? It's really kind of grotesque, in my opinion. I use that word a lot lately, because everything is grotesque to me, but in a horrifying way. And it's kind of like, oh, it's so horrifying. It's kind of laughable that we even do this, or that we think it's okay. I just, it's alarming again. Lisa for Truth. Who says they're lesser? I certainly don't. But I think a lot of other people do. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe people's perception on animals, other animals, have changed. I got a question. I asked my patrons, because I was kind of in a uninspired situation. I just felt really kind of out of it. The world feels like it's on fire to me, and so I'm getting upset about that, and I can't focus on other things. So I asked my patrons, hey, can you give me suggestions for another video topic for, the better, there's a gnat right in front of me. I hate them. Give me a topic to look into or to discuss and things like that. And first of all, everybody who responded had amazing suggestions, and some of which I'm like, why didn't I think about that, or why haven't I done that yet? And so I'll probably end up doing all of them eventually. But one person asked if communism was incapable of existing because of human nature. And I don't know I think this is an interesting question. And I think it's also a kind of a not precise question, because we are not inseparable from nature. We are human nature. Every system in which we devise is human nature, because we are not apart from it. Just because we have complex systems of communication and complex systems of assuring survival, it is still a part of the natural world. And I think that a lot of people don't know this or don't realize this. So is communism capable of existing? Sure. In fact, human societies used to be very egalitarian in nature. So because we've done it before, it does seem like we're capable of doing it again. Again, we have to be careful. I think all systems are capable of corruption, because we have people in those systems that are quite greedy. Again, another aspect of human nature. And we need to find a balance between assuring that the corruption doesn't get there, but also that everybody's needs are met. And I think I know, from my opinion, at any rate, I see at least those type of systems that are associated with leftists. I think that they're particularly vulnerable to corruption, as is our current system, of course, as you've probably noticed. But because those systems rely on a aspect of mutual trust and mutual understanding of roles and goals and things like that. Well, if somebody doesn't have that intention and wants to basically become a monarch or a dictator or whatever, wants to gain that type of power, I think that those systems are particularly vulnerable to that mentality, because of the aspect of relying on kind of the goodness of human beings. And not everybody's good. But again, that bad aspect is, again, a part of human nature in some people. otherwise and it's otherwise in other people. So somebody asked a question about jellyfish. Michael Contreras asks, do jellyfish have brains or a central nervous system? Is that why some species of jellyfish are immortal? Yeah, they do have a central nervous system. I don't know enough about jellyfish anatomy, but I know that they do have a central nervous system. So yeah, they essentially do have a brain in a way. I don't know if that's what makes them immortal. I'm not aware of immortal jellyfish, to be perfectly honest. People are you. I'm just gonna have to take your word for that in this case. I don't know if that's why they're immortal. Certainly, we have brains and we are not immortal. So I'm not sure if that is the defining feature of gaining immortality. Same with lobsters, right? Don't they live for pretty much centuries, or aren't they capable of living for centuries? They have a little lobster brain too. It just doesn't look like our brain, but certainly they have a CNS, a central nervous system. Torrential Rage asks, does human nature make a pro-utopian / communist argument that humans naturally gravitate to social groups and support and love each other? Yeah and no. So I think that we are social animals. Obviously, we bond as societies. We have this laws of reciprocity where if someone gives to you, you give to them. That for can related people. So for friendships, for instance, we have that reciprocal relationship, if you will. Again, that reciprocal relationship relies on trust, and that trust can be broken. And that trust, and when it's broken, that is still an aspect of human nature. And does that aspect of that kind of communal existence make a pro-utopian or communist argument? It doesn't make an argument at all. We are capable of that system. Absolutely. We are also capable of a pretty terrible system in which those things of reciprocity are always broken, where people do take advantage of others. We see that every day in our own system. It is, so we are also capable of that. Again, that is an aspect of human nature, obviously, because we're not separated from nature at any point in time. Lisa for Truth asks, did you hear about the first chimp murder? No, I haven't. I was under the impression that chimpanzees could be very violent and could kill each other, for sure. They are very violent beings. So I'm not sure if Howard, did a chimpanzee kill a human being or another chimpanzee? So I guess I haven't heard about it. John Y answers Torrential Rage's question better than I did by saying that I think we gather to survive, but also greed is for survival, right? So we don't have to be, but we are. Maybe we do have to be. We have aspects of being greedy where we want to hoard. That hoarding behavior is very human, but it's part of human nature. And we have to teach our young ones to share. And that sharing is a pro-social behavior, a good behavior that benefits society. but we still have that tendency to do those not so pro-social behaviors like hoarding or not sharing something. That's part of human nature as well. It's a complicated question that we can't really tease apart. hmm Lisa for Truth mentions regarding the chimpanzees, they usually kill over mating another chimp. Okay, yeah, that was my understanding too. But this wasn't a killing, this was a murder. So, what is the difference between killing and murder? Is it killing? Is it kind of, are you defining it as the intent behind it? Like the intent was that the chimpanzee, in a fit of rage, murdered someone that was not mating related. Is that kind of what we're defining here? Um, so I just thought that they could kill no matter what. I know that a lot of the times it is over mating behaviors, but I was under the impression that they could have violent outbursts, just akin to human beings having violent outbursts. Was it kind of planned murder, as in like the chimp had the, wanted to, had the thought process of killing the other chimp before the murder took place or the killing took place, or was it in a fit in a it was it essentially a crime of passion that was not mating related, but it was still not a planned murder? Does that make sense? Lisa for Truth, they think so. Okay, so it was a planned murder. That was what they think so. Oh, Majufi asked if this took place in captivity or in the wild. Okay, yeah, no, I haven't heard of. Obviously, I haven't heard that. That would be interesting. I know that in our circumstances, in most of the murders that take place, even most violent crimes, are crimes of passion where they're not really planned. Um, and I think that, the way in which we define, the way in which we basically define levels of murders, homicide, manslaughter, things like that, the way in which we define those and the way in which we determine the penalty for them is not exactly precise, because just because you tried to hide the aspect doesn't mean that you intended to do it in the first place. And I think that gets mixed up a lot. Because again, most violent crimes are crimes of passion. They're very spur of the moment. And you can still have guilt over that. What they're essentially saying, in order to define it in the ways that they have for the amount of penalties that people receive if they're caught, or even if they're accused of the crime and didn't even commit it, or wrongly accused, even if they're wrongly accused, the fact that something was covered up per se doesn't mean that it was intended in the first place. And the covering up, that prosecutors often argue the covering up of the murder was intent to do it in the first place. I think that's hard to even know in human circumstances. And many a times it's hard for people to dissect that into planned and unplanned and guilt and non-guilt and things like that. I don't know what a chimp would do. I thought that in the wild, at least, chimpanzees killed each other regardless sometimes. Um, so that was my understanding. I just knew that they were very violent, and I prefer to focus on bonobos because I think that they are so I view chimpanzees as kind of this weird, they're the kind of, I guess, antisocial aspects of humans, if you will. They show a lot of those antisocial behaviors, and not like, antisocial as in kind of aggressive, very, very non-pro-social behaviors. While bonobos are more display kind of the pro-social behaviors of what humans are capable of doing. And we are like in the middle of the two, where we do antisocial and pro-social behaviors. I think that's an interesting question. I'll have to look into that. All right. Thank you guys so much for hearing me rant. I do appreciate that. I have been the thing about the time that we have on Earth being so finite, very limited. I've been thinking about that a lot, especially with people forcing kids to go back to school, and forcing people to go back into work physically. When this pandemic is still raging, when we know the outcome, we understand, right? Everybody knows the outcome could be death. We are essentially accepting, well, I'm not personally, but I don't get to make those decisions. We are essentially accepting that our society is putting us in harm's way intentionally. So I personally, Lisa, equate that to murder. I think that if a worker dies from COVID because they were forced to go into work, that is murder, because we know the outcome or the possibility of what COVID can do to people. If somebody gets sick but doesn't die, just mildly sick, but brings that home to a loved one who is particularly vulnerable and does die, that too is murder, because again, we know the outcome. And we've been thrust in a situation that totally seems out of control. And again, I always have to say we need to reevaluate our the point of having society in the first place. Because if it's killing us, if it's causing us so much grief, is maintaining society worth it? I think we can change it, but again, I'm a lone person in a sea of like traditional ways of thinking, and I hope that we change that. Okay, so that's interesting. Lisa for Truth mentions that they heard this particular situations. Yeah, they heard this particular situation in anthropology. I majored in anthropology, and I did not hear this situation, so I'm gonna have to look that up. Yeah, and bonobos are amazing. They have sex in order to reconcile differences. Isn't that cool? I think that's really cool. That's I think a better way to reconcile differences than fighting each other and trying to kill each other, right? Anyways, thank you for listening to me rant about this, and I'm really upset by it still, and I don't know if I don't want to be the only one in this. I do feel very isolated in this thought process, and I hope you guys are able to understand what I'm saying here, and hopefully you'll take some of this to heart and help me at least try to change people's way of thinking, because I think we need to really value our time way more than we do. I think we also don't handle death very well. And because of that, we don't realize that our time is is again, priceless. And we should be valued as individuals and as groups for that matter. So thank you guys so much for being here. I hope you guys have a great week. I do have a normal, quote unquote, normal video coming. I know I mentioned this to the patrons, but I'm going to be addressing why people don't wear masks with the COVID thing happening. From what I know so far, there's generally not research on this because it's a relatively new phenomenon. At least the outbreak is, and that particular result of the outbreak, as far as like studying it is concerned. However, the core behavior in and of itself as to why people aren't protecting themselves and stuff like that, I think that core behavior isn't new. It is a quite old phenomenon. I think that it has to do with destructive obedience, basically. And so we'll get into that topic in a traditional video where, you know, I tell you about it. I don't have a live stream about it. I may talk about it in a live stream later on because it's a fascinating topic. And I actually will be doing a lot of hypothesis building in this one because of the lack of research. So I hope you guys will enjoy that when that video comes out. And just stay with me. I really love having you guys here and just hearing me talk. And I like seeing your comments. Sorry that I haven't responded to a lot of people's comments in the videos. I am getting around to that. It just takes some time. I got a huge influx of people commenting on the Elon Musk video that I made months ago. So I've been kind of addressing some of those and then kind of in the order in which I see them, basically. So I am getting to your comments, and I do apologize for the delay. Anyways, have a great week. I hope to talk to you, I guess, Friday. So it's not going to be a very long week in that regard. And yeah, bye, guys. I have to end the stream. I'm tired.